Hello, hello, and welcome to today's podcast. My name is Laura Reines, and this is the Olivia McHugh Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Well, our topic today is introverts and extroverts, and I'm sure that this is a topic that a lot of people know a little bit about. So my goal in talking with you today is to bring you up to speed, and so you can be one of those people that knows a lot about introverts and extroverts. And the reason I decided that this would be something good to talk about is because it's these differences between, being more withdrawn maybe and being more outgoing that can really cause conflicts or rifts in relationships. So I thought it would be a good idea if we just kind of broke down introverts and extroverts, and then I will provide you with some definitions so that you'll be able to kind of put yourself in the right category in terms of which personality type you feel that you have. And I'll give you a resource that you can use online, a little quiz or assessment that you can take to help you kind of identify your personality types. And then we'll kind of talk a little bit about how to maximize the strengths. If you are an extrovert, how do you make that tendency or that trait work for you? And in the same way, if you happen to be an introvert, what are some things that you can do to make that trait work for you as well? So, very interesting because our personalities are something, they're pretty deeply ingrained, and it's something that, is established quite early on, and they tend to remain stable over time. And that means that while we may change our attitudes or our views or our opinions on things, the core of who we really are, that being our personality, does not change much throughout the course of our lives. So people tend to be kind of what's the word that I want to look, kind of have a tendency, I guess, to be more outgoing or more internally centered. So those that are more outgoing, or at least that we perceive as being more outgoing, are referred to as extroverts. And an extrovert is someone who tends to get their energy from the outside or from being with other people. So extroverts are usually pretty easy to identify in society or at work, at the office, on public transportation. Extroverts are the people who will probably strike up a conversation with you, whether they know you or not. And by the time you arrive at your destination, getting off the bus as it would be, or train or what have you, you kind of feel like you know a lot about this person that you just met. An extrovert is kind of all outside. They're kind of all public. One of the myths about extroverts is that they're loud and boisterous. Well, to someone who's an introvert, it will likely seem that that is the case, that they just don't ever stop talking. However, what introverts need to realize, and even other extroverts can realize about themselves, is that the more that they're out there and the more that they're socializing with other people, the more energy that they seem to have. So that's what feeds them and what energizes them and gets them feeling like, they want to get up and go. It's that being with other people. Now, by contrast, when an extrovert is forced into a situation where they're alone, maybe they don't have plans on a particular, Friday or Saturday night, or maybe they're just taking a road trip and they're traveling alone. Something that's probably highly unlikely for an extrovert. But for the sake of an example, if an extrovert is traveling alone and they're in the car by themselves for long periods of time, they'll tend to feel very zapped of their energy. They're not the types of people who tend to value that downtime or that time to be alone and have their own thoughts and think. In society, we might label extroverts as the social butterfly, or being the party boy or the party girl. They seem to always want to be out there. When they enter a room, you definitely know that they're there because they'll either announce their presence, or saying something like, "I'm here, the party can start now," or maybe they'll do something to draw attention to themselves, like trip and fall down inside the doorway, or just have some kind of attention getter. And again, that's not because they're trying to show off. It's because that is truly how they feel good. That's truly what gives them that motivation and that energy. And then a final quality of extroverts is that they tend to think as they speak. So if you find yourself saying something and then later thinking, oh my gosh, why didn't I think before I said that? Or, man, I wish I could take that back. You might be an extrovert. Extroverts, that process is very much simultaneous, the thinking and the speaking. And then once the whole statement is out, then they kind of review, oh my goodness, what did I just say? So that's a little bit of very, very surface information about extroverts. Now, on the other side of the scale of personality, we have the introverts. And an introvert is more than just being the opposite of an extrovert. And by the same token, an extrovert is so much more than just being the opposite of an introvert. They each have their own very unique qualities and tendencies. But in terms of the introvert, they are people who prefer or who tend to get their energy from inside, from within, from being alone. So it's not that you will find an introvert seeking opportunities to be out with people. Now, they can exist with other people and they enjoy people. They're not shy, they're not antisocial, they do enjoy people. And they often will even put themselves in a position where they have to be around people. For example, I'm a pretty strong introvert, but I have a podcast or a radio show. I'm a college professor. I was an actress. I was very involved in theater and in the performing arts vocally. And so one would think, well, that doesn't make sense. How can you be this, social, or this wallflower, I should say, but yet you do all these activities? Well, that's what I mean by saying it doesn't mean that introverts are antisocial or that we're not outgoing. It's just that after we have periods like that where we're, with people all the time and it's very noisy in our world, after those moments, we're going to need some time by ourselves to download and to recharge. Again, like I said, many people think that introverts just don't have social skills, and that's definitely not the case. That's one of the great myths. Similar to when I was talking about the extrovert and how people think that they're just obnoxious and that they party all the time and that they never know when to stop talking. Neither of those are true. As an example of an introvert, introverts tend to prefer solitary activities. So, for example, an introvert would really prefer sometimes to stay home and read a good book versus going out to a party. That downtime is especially important. And I think that this would especially be the case if an introvert had come off of a period of being around other people a lot. They're really going to think, man, that book is looking more and more appealing. And introverts are also characterized by thinking before they speak. So an introvert rarely will say, I'm really sorry that I said that. I should have thought about that a little bit before I said it. And that's because for an introvert, everything goes on up in their heads. So they'll almost play out this entire conversation and think, okay, if I say this, this could be the result. On the other hand, if I say this could be the result of the conversation. So they have it kind of all planned out and really thoroughly thought through in their mind before they say something. So they don't often find themselves putting their foot in their mouth. On kind of the downside of this, though, is sometimes introverts, take so much time to think about something that they miss out on good opportunities. So an introvert can be so busy weighing the pros and cons and thinking, okay, if I say this, then this will happen, or if I make this choice, then this is likely to happen. And this whole process can just go on and on and on for such a long time that the opportunity has passed them by. And I know, as an introvert myself, this has definitely happened to me. I've spent so much time trying to decide, should I apply for this job or should I take advantage of this opportunity, that by the time I finally make a decision and decide to come out of my head, so to speak, out of my head with it, the opportunity has already passed. So we've talked a little bit about the definitions of introverts and extroverts, and one thing I wanted to add is that in our society, it tends to be the extrovert who sets the stage or the standard in terms of what's normal. So all other personality types tend to be judged against that of the extrovert. So if the extrovert is considered normal, and I'm making little air quotes with my hands, if the extrovert is considered normal, then the introvert is considered abnormal. If wanting to go out and be around people almost all the time is considered normal, then wanting to stay in with a good book is not normal. If needing some kind of noise in the background or sound in the background when you're working, like the radio or the television, if that's considered the standard, then it's really kind of abnormal, if you will, to want to work in complete silence. So people are expected to relate to the world or to relate to others in the same way that an extrovert does. And in some cases that's good, but in some cases it's not so good at the same time. It used to be the case that research and studies always reported that introverts were outnumbered by extroverts, meaning there are more extroverts in the world than there are introverts in the world. And now, I was just reading a book yesterday, and the author was stating that she did some research, and it ended up being that that's not necessarily 100% accurate, that figure of there being almost double the number of extroverts as there are introverts. And if you think about it, I can see where she's coming from, and her logic in the book made very good sense. If you think about how they find out people's personality tendencies, they might interview them, stop them in a public place and ask them to take a survey or do something like that. Now I ask you, how many introverts are going to raise their hand and say, yes, 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 put me in a social situation. I want to be interviewed. I'm sure there will be some, but you can see how even that little bit can throw off kind of the reports or the results. Introverts just aren't as likely to speak up and be counted. So when they do, it is coming out that there actually are more introverts than what was originally assumed to be the case. So how do you figure out if you're an introvert, if you're an extrovert, or if you fall somewhere, you know, in the middle or far on one side, far on the other side? How do you figure that out? Well, there are a lot of online tests and assessments that you could take. There's also an equal amount or maybe even more paper and pencil assessments that you could take if you visited an employment counselor or a mental health counselor. They might be able to direct you to where you could find the pencil and paper version of those assessments. However, if you are interested in looking online, there are a lot of little tests that you can take there to help you kind of figure out where you fall on that personality continuum. And one test that I took is can be found at www.nerdtests.com. That's www.nerdtests.com. So I went to this website and I took the test, and there's some interesting questions on there. One of them, for example, would be it's a Thursday night. What are your plans for Saturday? And so then you check or you circle the response that's most appropriate for you. And the responses range from anything like, I have no idea to what I'm doing, I have somewhat of an idea, or I know exactly what I'm doing on Saturday night. Another one is your telephone rings at 9:30 p.m. and you look at the caller ID, you don't recognize the number. What do you do? On the one end, do you answer it and make small talk with whoever it is that calls? Do you say, well, I'll just let them leave a message, I'll listen to it, and if it's important, I'll call them back, or do you ignore it altogether? Another one is friends call you at the last minute and ask you to go out with them. How do you feel about that? You know, is that prospect exciting to you? Are you kind of neutral about it? Or is it terrifying or annoying? So you go through, and I believe there are 10 questions on this assessment, and then you can also click a button and it will kind of give you your results at the end. It won't kind of give you your results. It will give you your results at the end. And the thing to remember about these assessments is that they are not the be-all, end-all of diagnosing something about your personality. What these tests tend to reveal are tendencies. This is how you tend to be. This is how you tend to operate. So keep that in mind when you're doing these. And something I always suggest too is if you're going to do one of these personality tests, it's a good idea to do a couple of them, because then what you can do is compare the results from test A to test B. And if you keep coming up quite similar in terms of your results, that means that that's probably a pretty accurate description of your personality tendencies. So in terms of my results, I came out as being somewhat introverted. And I have to say, I pretty much agree with that. the assessment said that I'm more introverted than extroverted, and that is definitely true. After being around people all day at my job, or being around a house full of people, if you're having a party or if you have guests, I definitely need to get the heck out of Dodge. I need to sequester myself in my room or in another place and just be by myself and have my own thoughts. And maybe I don't have any background noise on. I don't have the radio. I don't have, anything like that. And I'm totally okay with that. In fact, I'm one of those people who seems to consistently be misplacing their cell phone. And I know that there are people that would just totally freak out if that was the case because it's their cell phone that is their link to the world. And that's where they get their energy. However, for me, I misplace my cell phone and I say, you know what? No one's going to bother me. I don't have to deal with incoming calls for a period of time. Now, disclaimer, I wouldn't be satisfied or happy if I totally lost my cell phone. But there are times when I think it's okay if I'm just a little bit unreachable at times. So go ahead and take that test. I'd be curious to hear from you in terms of what your results show. I'd like to talk about a little bit about how to maximize the strengths of your personality type. If you're an introvert, how do you work with that and use those traits that you have to your benefit? And in the same vein, if you're an extrovert, what do you do to maximize those strengths? Well, I think if you're an extrovert, to start off with, make the most of your ability to be comfortable around others and to attract them to you. That's considered a very, very good and positive trait in our society. So make the most of that. If you are comfortable being out there, put yourself out there. That can come in very handy when you're trying to look for a new job, when you're moving, when you're trying to negotiate a salary or something like that. So by all means, where you're comfortable doing it, go ahead and put yourself out there. If your goal is to meet new people too, that's an awesome way to go about doing that. It's usually extroverts don't have an issue with making friends or meeting new people because they are so comfortable in that role of making small talk and making friends out of strangers within a very short time frame. If you're an extroverted, go ahead and ask an introverted friend to do something. Don't just assume that because they said no last time, they're going to say no this time. That may not be the case at all, but it may be the case that an introvert just needs a little bit more encouraging. So as the extroverted friend, just encourage them to come with you and to go out. But remember, if they say no, don't pester them. Go ahead and take no for an answer and just tell them, well, that you'll try them another time. If you're an extrovert, bring your good ideas, your innovations, your suggestions, your possible solutions to the table at work. Extroverts tend to be rather comfortable speaking out, and so go ahead and do that. Just make sure that you're not taking over or dominating a meeting. And remember that as an extrovert, you want to really think through your presentation before you give it, because like I said, extroverts have a tendency to speak first and then think later. And then my advice to extroverts would be to pause every now and then and to take kind of an internal inventory. How are you doing? What's going on with you? Are you in the place in your life where you hope that you would be? It's okay to have some downtime and some time to yourself. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you don't have any friends. It's really okay. And in the same vein, know that it's okay to turn down an invitation, to say no. Just because you're seen as a social butterfly or you are so outgoing most of the time, it's okay to not feel up to it. And it's okay to assert yourself in that way and say, no, thank you, maybe next time. Now, on the other hand, if you are an introvert, I have some suggestions for you. Try to form an alliance or a partnership with someone that's more extroverted than you are. They can almost become your voice in a way. Introverts tend to be more comfortable in smaller groups. So if you have one or two friends that are a little bit more extroverted than you are, and you're able to communicate with them, say at work, about ideas that you have or potential solutions, that could be a really, really good partnership. And your ideas, because you spend so much time up in your head, your ideas plus their communication skills and their outgoing nature could really take you somewhere, professionally speaking. Introverts, also write your thoughts down as you have them. Like I said, we're all up in our heads, and so there's a lot of stuff going on up there. And sometimes we run a risk of forgetting. When the time comes and we can't recall what that good idea was, or we can't recall what we wanted to say to that person, write that stuff down. You won't forget later on. Plus, it's another way for you just to kind of think through it and make sure that what you end up saying is ultimately what you want to say. Introverts also, don't be afraid to use other forms of communication. Speaking to someone face to face is not the only way that we can communicate with someone. So if you are more comfortable sending an email, a text message, shoot, even writing a letter, if you're more comfortable with that, it's okay. Go ahead and use those avenues for communication. Play to your strengths in that way. However, the word of caution that I would impart with this is just to make sure that the method of communication that you use is appropriate for both the recipient and for the situation. So, you're probably not going to want to text your boss, some great idea. So just make sure that, it's appropriate. But don't feel bad about preferring to communicate that way. I know that my family says that they call me and they don't reach me, but if they text me, I respond right away. That's just kind of a preferred method of communication for me. And introverts, it's okay to say no to social invitations. If you are zapped and drained, and if you've spent a whole day around people and you just don't feel up to it, don't feel guilty about saying no. You're being honest and you're living in integrity, and that's totally fine. However, I would also say it's okay to attend that social event. Maybe you'll warm up. You'll warm into it kind of as you go. Or it's okay to attend that social event and just kind of sit on the outskirts and observe. You never know who might come up to you and want to start a conversation with you. Or you may find that after observing for a while, you do feel like engaging or interacting with others. So you never know how that might turn out. And introverts, and I'm chuckling because I'm saying this to myself as well as I am to all of you listeners out there who may happen to be introverts. Introverts, once in a while, you may just have to force yourself to get out there and to do something social. What I found works the best is just relax, just relax and be yourself. And like I said, I think I can't speak for all introverts, but I know for me, once I'm in a situation, I tend to end up being glad that I was there. So the thought of getting ready and going out and being around people at this party or event is kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can handle it. I've been around people all day. However, those times that I usually push through that and just make myself go and be out there, it might take me a while to warm up. It might take me 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But once I do, I end up socializing, even if it's just with, a handful of people that happen to be sitting near me. And I usually end up having a really good time and being glad that I did that I kind of stepped out of my comfort zone and really made myself go do something that I hadn't thought that I would enjoy. So that wraps up my show for today. We talked a little bit about introverts and extroverts. And no, it is not the case that introverts are antisocial and extroverts are over-the-top individuals that just never stop talking. What I'd like to encourage you to do is go to www.nerdtest.com. No, they're not paying me to say that, but it is kind of a fun little test. Take the assessment, and then why don't you tweet me your results? You can find me on Twitter at Lauranium4. That's spelled Lauranium and then the number 4. I'd love to hear what your results are and if you agree with them or if you don't. So that's about all the time that I have for today. Thank you for listening. And as always, until I see you or until I talk to you again, I hope that life treats you well and that you do have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you very much for joining me.